Timmy and Tommy. Timmy and Tommy used to be two ordinary little boys who lived with their mother and father in a little cottage on the edge of the woods. That was until one day they went exploring in the woods. They found an untidy little cottage with smoke pouring out of the chimney.
"Let's go have a look,"
whispered Timmy.
"Okay,"
said Tommy. They crept closer to explore and peered in through the window of the cottage. They saw a big cauldron bubbling away in the fireplace, and stirring the cauldron was a lady dressed in black with a pointy hat. A witch! Timmy and Tommy watched the witch throwing things into the cauldron, some frog spawn, a dead bat, the tail of a rat, and then she stirred the cauldron again. Timmy and Tommy were so interested they forgot to stay out of sight, and before they knew it, the witch had seen them. She captured them and locked them in a big cage in the corner of her cottage.
"What are you going to do to us?"
asked Timmy bravely. "I'm going to eat you," shouted the witch. "But first I need to make you smaller so you can fit in my cauldron." And she waved her magic wand, and Timmy and Tommy started to shrink. They got smaller and smaller and smaller until, in the end, they were the size of two little mice. "That's better," said the witch. "That'll teach you not to spy on nasty Natalie, you horrible little children. Now I'm going back to cook you for my dinner." Timmy and Tommy panicked. They ran around and round the cage shouting for help, but it was no use. Nasty Natalie's cottage was in the middle of the woods, and there were no other houses for miles around. After a while, Nasty Natalie went outside to pick some stinging nettles from her garden to put into the cauldron.
"What are we going to do?"
said Timmy.
"I've got an idea,"
said Tommy.
"We're so small that I think we can squeeze through the bars of the cage and run home."
So they both three squeezed through the bars of the cage. They were standing in the middle of the floor when the door opened, and Nasty Natalie came back in. She took one look at the cage and screamed in anger, "Where are you, you horrible little children?" Timmy and Tommy looked around. They saw a mouse hole in the wall of the cottage and made a run for it. Nasty Natalie saw them and dived to grab hold of them, but they ran into the mouse hole and hid. Nasty Natalie bent down to the mouse hole and put her eye against it, but it was too dark, so she couldn't see anything. "I know what will fix the little monsters," she said to herself, and she pushed two mouse traps into the mouse hole. "We'll see what happens when you try and get out of that hole." Ha 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 ha. Natalie laughed. Timmy and Tommy were too scared to move. They stayed hidden in the mouse hole for hours and hours. Eventually, Timmy said,
This is no good. We can't stay in this mouse hole forever. We need to try and sneak out."
So they waited until it was night time, and Nasty Natalie had gone to bed. Then they crept out of the mouse hole carefully, tiptoed past the mouse traps, and ran to the front door of the cottage. But it was no use. They couldn't reach the door handle to let themselves out. So they sat on the floor and tried to think of a plan. But try as they might, they couldn't think of anything that would get them out of the cottage. They sat on the floor for so long that they actually fell asleep. Meanwhile, Nasty Natalie woke up in the middle of the night. She was thirsty and decided to get herself a glass of water. She climbed out of bed and was halfway across the floor when she saw Tommy and Timmy asleep on the floor. Natalie gave a great big laugh and reached out to grab the two sleeping boys. "Ha ha ha!" But her laugh made Timmy and Tommy wake up with a start. They jumped to their feet and ran for the mouse hole again, with Natalie chasing after them. Timmy and Tommy ran into the mouse hole and jumped over the two traps. Natalie put her eye up to the mouse hole, but it was too dark and she couldn't see anything. She rolled up her sleeve and reached into the mouse hole, trying to grab the two boys. Yow! Natalie had put her fingers into one of the mouse traps. She pulled her hand back out of the mouse holes and shook her hand furiously, trying to shake the mousetrap off her fingers. "Eek! Ow! Ouch! Ooh!" she yelped. Timmy and Tommy laughed and laughed. Natalie stamped her feet and shouted at the top of her voice, but it was no use. She couldn't reach into the mouse hole to get Timmy and Tommy, so she stood by the entrance and waited and waited and waited.
Now we're trapped,
moaned Tommy.
She's going to stand there and wait for us. I've got an idea,
said Tommy.
There's another exit to this mouse hole. We can't get out of the cottage yet, but I'm going to teach Nasty Natalie a lesson for making us prisoners.
Tommy explained his plan to Timmy, and between them they slowly and gently carried the second mousetrap round to the second mouse hole. They crept quietly across the floor and set the mousetrap down behind Nasty Natalie. Then they shouted at the top of their voices,
"Oi, Natalie! We're behind you!"
Nasty Natalie jumped. She turned round and saw Timmy and Tommy standing in the middle of the floor. With a laugh, she ran across the room to grab them and stood on the second mousetrap. Yah! Timmy and Tommy ran back to their mouse hole, laughing as Natalie hopped on the spot with a mousetrap on her foot, yelling, "Ouch, ouch, 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 ow, ow!" So Timmy and Tommy didn't escape from Nasty Natalie, but I'm sure they will be trying again, and I'm sure Natalie will still be trying to catch them. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. The end.